All right, it is Thursday, March 5th. I'm going to apologize ahead of time because there's a lot of information that's going to come at you today. So I'll try and take it slow, but I don't guarantee that. Um, so we'll just roll with it. So we're going to start working on hatching to put siding in, and that's what this little matrix, we're going to be playing with hatches over here. But before we get there, I want to jump back up. What I'd asked you to do on Tuesday was to finish blocking out these 4 elevations, which essentially meant putting the sort of outer profile on each one of them using your X reference of the first floor. The next step to getting windows and doors in, I'm going to delete all that and delete all this. So here's where you're going with your elevations, is we're going to create all these elevations side by side and add hatching to them. But before we do that, we have to be able to put the doors and the windows in the right spot. So Taylor has handed out a sheet that's got some of these dimensions on it, but a lot of the plan stuff you will be able to do again using your external reference. Oh, dang it, I got rid of something I shouldn't have. I'm going to go back and put my first floor line. I have to go back to my building section and draw this first floor line all the way across. So I see my first floor line on there. So the way to get your windows in is I'm going to move to my A elevation thin, because all these guys were on A elevation medium. And just like I brought the walls down, I'm going to bring lines down for windows. So I'm going to erase these 2 guys here. And I'm going to draw a line from the outside edge of the window frame all the way down, and it doesn't really matter how far I drag it, just so I can see it. And then I'm going to copy that line 5 times to each outer edge of each window. So CO for copy. Grab that line, and then I'm snapping my line from the left edge of that window to the right edge, and I keep bringing them over and over and over. And now I know sort of across the face of that elevation where those windows go. What you guys don't know is how tall each window is and where it sits in relationship to this line, which is your kitchen or your living room floor. If you look back over here, here's my section, and I brought that line over. There's my guy standing on the top of the subfloor. So generally, door heads and window heads are about 6'10" off the floor. Some people go 6'8", some people go 7 feet. We're going to go 6'10". So I'm going to offset this line, and I'm going to put him on layer 0 so that he sort of sticks out. So I'm going to offset him up 6'10". Whoops, I can't even type. And just drag that line up. And if you're wondering where I'm getting this, do I have this on this sheet? Yeah, this is pretty close to what Taylor handed out. It's got some extra jargon on it, don't worry about that. But this is where I'm getting that dimension, 6'10". I'm going from the top of the porch, which is exactly the same line as the living room floor or the kitchen floor, offsetting it up 6'10". And then I'm going to come down right here because my windows are 3'6" deep or tall. So we went up 6'10", down, down 3'6", which is the equivalent of down here. I've got another dimension that says 3'4". Gets you in the same place. All right, so I'm going to go back over here, offset 42, which is the same as 3'6", and now I have a rectangle, or I have the ability to create 3 rectangles. I am going to draw a rectangle, and the use of the rectangle is going to make adding trim and door frames that much easier. So I'm going to type REC for rectangle, and then just go corner to corner corner to corner, corner to corner. The last thing I'm going to do, and then I'm going to give you a couple minutes to catch up, is I am going to, there's around each elevation, there is trim all the way around. So the lines that you have drawn are literally the outside edge of the windows. There's 4-inch trim all the way around. And so if you look at a window, so here's the trim. The darker line right here is the yellow line I just put in. We're going to offset it outward 4 inches to give ourselves some trim. And then when we get to drawing the window, we're going to go in 1.5 inches because that's the thickness of the frame. So this is where I'm getting these numbers. I'm going to go back to my CAD file. This is where you're going to go. You just drew that rectangle. You're going to offset it outward 4 inches to get this trim. Maybe it's easier to see on this one. And then when we're ready, we're going to offset inward 1.5 inches. So I'm going to go back to this one. O for offset, 4, and this is why I use the rectangle. And then I'm going to select all 3 of these guys and move them to A elevation, fine. And save, and I'm going to pause a minute while you guys all catch up. All right. So this is where, I want to get into hatching. We can finish these windows later. The way I like them drawn is on the handout, so it shouldn't be too hard to, but I do want to remind you, when you bring your yellow lines down, they go outside frame to outside frame. That's essentially the rough opening. It is the hole the contractor keeps in the wall, so when he goes to Menards and buys a window unit, he just slips it into this hole. That's what so you're going out to out. And then when you draw the frame inside the window, this little guy, the next line, is what you're going to use. He's 1.5 inches in. And that's where you're going to get the one that looks like this. So the yellow line is the darker line we just drew in there, and then you offset 4 inches to get the trim. Okay, let's play with hatch. So hopefully you have, these are all 8-foot by 8-foot squares. And I am going to, you can keep your squares. I'm going to move over here because I've got some notes I want to show you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's make sure that you all have some viewports on another sheet of paper, on a layout, because that's what makes this really interesting. So if you go to the bottom, you're in model space right now, click on whatever sort of layout one. You have a sort of a naked layout with nothing in it. We're going to, together as a group, we're going to change this to an 11 by 17 and put some viewports in it. So first thing I'm going to do is right click on the word layout 1 and rename it. So right click, rename, and I'm just going to rename it Hatch Practice. All right, and then click anywhere. All I have done is renamed that tab. I haven't changed anything about this piece of paper. Then I'm going to right click on the words Hatch Practice. Go up to Page Setup Manager, so left click on Page Setup Manager. He's still an 8.5 by 11. So he's highlighted right here. I'm going to modify him, so left click on the word Modify. And I am going to change him from an 8.5 by 11 to 11 by 17. The first thing you want to do is just make sure you have the little print server Minneapolis black and white showing. If it's not showing, you can click the down arrow. These are all your good little options. It's about halfway down, black and white. Then you can come down here and change the paper size. So left click, and somewhere in the middle-ish, if you slide up and down, you want plain old 11 by 17. and you'll see that the little thumbnail changes. What to plot is the layout. It should automatically come up layout. In the upper right, the plot style table should be left click monochrome. He automatically should switch to landscape down here. And then if you go right in the middle on the bottom, scale line weights. So print server black and white, 11 by 17, monochrome, landscape, scale line weights, okie dokie. And now you see that the sheet behind us jumps in size, and you'll see that the plot size right here switches to 11 by 17, and you can close this out. I'm going to delete this viewport that's sitting in there. If you don't have a viewport in here, that's fine, because but if you have one in there, just go ahead and delete it. I am going to switch to my viewport layer all the way down. If you don't have the viewport layer yet, we won't worry about that. You can do this on layer 0. And I'm going to put 3 viewports in here. And I'm going to put one over here, just like we did with the building section, at 1/4 of an inch. So the way you get the viewports in there are MV for make view. Draw yourself a big old box. And now select the box. And I'm going to first, actually, before I select the box, I can see my little, I'm going to zoom in. So double click and zoom in on your 9 squares. And then come down here and make sure the scale, I'm going to close this thing out. Make sure your scale, right now this is just a weird old decimal number. Click the down arrow and change this guy to 1/4 inch. And it should zoom in and look like about that. And that's close enough. Doesn't matter if all your squares don't fit cleanly in there. I'm going to double click outside. And I'm going to draw another viewport. So this one's at 1/4 inch. I'm going to do one here right now set to 1/8 inch. So MV. Draw myself a box. Find my little guys in there. Put them in the middle. And change to 1/8 inch. And they fit a little bit easier in there. You should get just about all of them in. I'm double clicking outside. And then the last one, so this one's 1/4 inch, this one's 1/8 inch, this one's going to be 1 inch scale. So MV for make view. Draw myself a box. Double click and pan to put these guys in the middle. Zoom in. This is going to zoom way in when we get it. They're not going to all fit. So I'm going to click to 1 inch equals a foot, not 1:1. 1 inch equals a foot right there. And I hardly see anybody. What I want you to do is we're going to see if we can get 2 corners of 2 squares in there. And I'm going to double click outside. No, don't plot first. You're just picking the printer. And you won't have it. Those of you on laptops will not see my printer. Can you even pick, if you're used to printing on your home computer and your home printer and you don't have 11 by 17, it might not even show up. Do you have a setting called tabloid?
I've never tried to print.
Okay.
I
Okay.
I know I can print.
Okay, for this moment, those of you on laptops, just ignore it and follow along. Stay in model space. So, okay. So now we're going to talk about hatching. Get out of layer viewport and switch to, I'm going to hatch on layer 0 because it's easy for you guys to see my white stuff on a black background. There are 3 types of hatch: architectural hatch, user-defined hatch, and annotative hatches. And why we've drawn this matrix is that you're going to see what happens to each one of these hatches when you hatch at a 1/4 inch scale, an 1/8 inch scale, and 1 inch scale, which is why we did viewports at these 3 scales. What we're going to find out is that The scale, the annotative scale, which is what you're playing with down here in the lower right corner, doesn't matter for these guys, but it matters intensely for these guys. So the first thing I want you to do is go back down here to your annotative scale, lower right corner, and switch to 1/4 inch equals a foot. All right. Architectural scales are the fun ones, the ones that look like brick and shingles and sand and concrete and all that kind of stuff. And the way that you're going to start the hatch command is you just type H. It's also, if you're an icon person, it's this little icon right here, but I think it's faster to just type H and hit enter. And then you'll notice that your cursor changed and it says pick internal point, but if you didn't notice, your entire dashboard at the top changed. Where you're going to select your hatches before you click anywhere, if you go up here to pattern, you will see that there are probably 4 of them showing. There's an up arrow and a down arrow. If you click below the down arrow, there's a drop down arrow with a line over it. So left click on that, and now you can see like 16 different hatches. And if you scroll, you get to see all your options. Woohoo! All right. See all these pretty blue and yellow ones? Don't touch them. Okay? We don't do that. That's mechanical people do that. See if you scroll down, all these guys who start with ACAD ISO, don't touch them. This is all metric stuff, and it will not scale in our drawings are feet and inches. These guys won't show up, or they won't show up correctly. So don't touch them. We are looking for hatches that start with the letter AR, which stands for architectural. So I'm going to scroll up, left click and scroll up. And now I get to there. Here I am. The first one I have is ARB 816. That is a architectural hatch. It's an 8x16 block, like a concrete block. Do not be fooled. It's not really 8x16. Some doofus in ACAD land drew it and said it was, but it's not. So if you're trying to hatch something that looks like concrete block, this looks like it, but it really isn't. This guy next to it is similar. I don't know what the C stands for. I never, ever, ever use these. I'll show you how to make your own concrete block if that were what we wanted to do. This is an architectural 8x8. I don't know what Brillum means. This guy, brick standard, this guy is architectural concrete. So the ones you're going to use are architectural concrete. This is rough shake, like a cedar shake. There's a parquet floor. There's a herringbone. This one's sand. This one's brick. Again, it pretends to look like real brick, but it doesn't. So go ahead and pick any one that starts with AR and click. So you're going to select it. I'm going to pick this herringbone one because it's easy to see the difference. And now I have it selected, and now he wants me to pick inside a point. When you hatch, you have to hatch inside a boundary. You cannot hatch because if you remember, our black background is deep space. It goes on and on and on forever. And your computer will blow its mind if you tell it to hatch way off into deep space. It needs a border, which is why we drew this little rectangle or this square. And I do not know why I'm just getting that, but I'm just going to click for fun. All right. I should have a better pattern than that. So I'm going to hatch again. I'm going to pick parquet. Oh, you silly thing. I don't know. Is yours can you guys see yours? Yeah. Yeah, it's because I was trying to practice what I was doing. Save. All right, we're going to do this again. Hatch, pattern, herringbone. I'm going to switch this guy back to 0.
What layer are we at?
I'm on layer 0 just for fun. Angle, pattern. I'm at 1/4 inch equals a foot. I'm going to try it again. I'm going to draw something over here. H for hatch. Pick a point. Enter. What does he think he's at? Yada, yada, yada. Oh, I know what the problem is. Such a teachable moment. H for hatch, unclick that. There she goes. We'll talk about what my mistake was in a minute because you will all make the same mistake. Nah, so don't laugh at me. Okay, so now I can see my herringbone pattern. I want you to switch to 1/8 inch scale because remember we did the first one in quarter. So come down here and switch to 1/8 inch scale. And I'll have to go up here, type, I'll get this off the screen, H for hatch, and put that same hatch pattern into the block to the right. And he looks exactly the same. And now change your scale to 1 inch and do the same thing. H for hatch, put that guy in, he looks exactly the same. Okay, that was pretty easy, that was pretty obvious. We're going to switch to a user-defined hatch right now, and this is the one I use for siding. And anything, you can use this if you're doing Doug's projects where you've got board and batten siding, I can show you how to do that as well. So I'm going to switch back to 1/4 inch scale. H for hatch. And when I go over here to pattern and click the down arrow, scroll all the way, it's the absolute last hatch. He is the user-defined hatch. So click on him, left click on him, and now he comes in, actually when you come in, he comes in at 1 inch wide. So if you click right here, you'll get sort of, it looks like it's hatched completely, but it's actually horizontal lines 1 inch apart. To do siding, I'm going to switch this to 6 inches apart because that's what our siding is, and now I have siding at 6 inches. I'm going to switch my scale to 1/8 inch. I'm going to hit hatch. And I get the same thing, but just for fun to show you how this works, if my siding were actually vertical, like it is on the cottage, I can come up here to the angle, right here, and change that angle to 90 degrees, and hit enter, and now put my hatch pattern in there. And then I'm going to switch to 1 inch. This should be feeling pretty comfortable right now. H for hatch, put it in there. For fun, let's turn it to 45 degrees. You can do that. All right, here's where things get weird. Annotative hatches are hatches that are used for structural detailing, civil engineering, landscape engineering, things like that. And they are, if you remember, this little guy in the lower right corner, he is our annotative scale. And every time I change this scale, if we go back to our viewports, what shows up in our viewports changes scale. And that's what these hatches are going to do. So I am actually going to go back to 1/4 inch. So that the next place I'm going to hatch right here, so I have to be at 1/4 inch. Type H for hatch. Your annotative hatches are up here. They're at the very top because all of these hatches are alphabetical. There's only 6 of them, or 7, 6, 7, whatever this is, 8. They start with this guy right here, ANSI 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38. All of these, and the way you can remember that they're annotative is they start with the letters AN. When you use an ANSI hatch, he's annotative, so he has that special ability to kind of change his scale. You have to click this little guy right here. Next to the word associative, you're going to click annotative. Now go back and find one of those annotative hatches. Pick any one you want. I'm going to use ANSI 31. And I'm going to put this guy in, and I want him at an angle, so I actually have to come back up here and change my scale up there. Oh, I have to change that guy to 1. There we go. That's what I want, because we were playing around up here, so make sure these guys are back to 0 and 1. And that is my 1/4 inch ANSI 31. Now I want you to change your annotative scale to 1/8 inch. That wasn't it. There we go. H for hatch. ANSI 31. It still says 0 for the angle. It still says 1. Now you come in here and you'll notice it's a little bit bigger. This guy went in at 1/4 inch. This guy went in at 1/8 inch. All right, things are getting interesting. Change to 1 inch scale. 1 inch equals a foot. H for hatch. We're not changing anything up here. And now that guy goes in, enter. And if you zoom in, all the lines are really close together. So medium, they're wider apart, they're close together. Let's go now into our hatch practice layout. And you have 3 of these guys. I'm going to zoom out because that wasn't the one I was playing. I have to make sure that I'm going to draw a big line through here so I know I got the right one. And hatch practice, there, that's the one I want. So now I'm going to zoom in on this guy. I have to make sure he's set to 1/4 inch because that's what's showing up in there. Come on, 2 clicks. This guy is 1/8 inch. And then this guy is supposed to be 1 inch. Oh, I'm in the wrong one. All right. The ones that are going to look this, and that's the point of annotative. So if you zoom in and look at your viewports, the first 2 sets of hatches, these were the architectural ones, and these were the user-defined. When you change, they graphically, this guy looks big, and this guy looks small, and that guy looks big, and that guy looks small. But if you look at the annotative ones, which are the guys on the bottom, the bottom row, the only one that shows up of my 3 squares is the one that was set to 1/4 inch. The only one in this guy that shows up in my 3 squares is the one that was set to 1/8 inch. And the only one over here that shows up should be the one all the way, there you go. It's the one all the way to the right. Now the really weird thing is if you zoom in, and you measured, if you took a scale and you measured the distance between these lines and these lines and these lines, they are all the same distance apart. And it's because that's the type of hatch civil engineers, structural engineers, those people use. So when you go back to model space, everybody looks the same up here, but when you get down here, they're completely different sizes. But when you go into your viewports, these 3 guys are all the same size. It is completely understandable to me that if you go, I got no idea when I would ever use this, you will. So my goal for you is to just sort of understand that there are 3 different types of hatch, and most of all you will be using architectural and user-defined, but you will come across annotative hatching. If you look at the handout that you got today, that's going to turn into an assignment, and the final project is going to look like this. So this is the vertical siding, and he's a user-defined hatch. This guy, and I actually tell you that, this guy is AR roof shake siding at 0.5 scale, so we scaled him down. And this guy, my asphalt shingles, this is an ANSI hatch at 135 degrees, 0.5 scale. So I want you to be able to go in and manipulate these hatches, and so these guys will print the same when we actually put them on. There we go. So when we put them in the layout, you'll see that these two guys are 1/8 inch. That roof shake siding is small over here, but twice as big over here, even though I put it in at the same scale. My vertical siding shows close up, large over here, skinnier lines over here because that's a 1/4 inch and these guys are 1/8 inch. But if you look at these two are the ANSI hatches. The line pattern is exactly the same scale, even though that's a 1/4 inch and that is a 1/2 inch. So this drawing, this assignment is not due yet. The next thing that's due is the building section. That's what you should be working on. But if you get that done, you can certainly start working on this piece right here. Do not start hatching until you get all the windows and the doors and the trim in. And please note that there is, I'm going to go to this, there is trim on the corners. Every time you turn a corner on this house, there is a 4-inch piece of trim. So don't take your hatch all the way to the edge. Make sure you get this little red trim line in here. And all he is the outside profile offset in and put on that layer. Oh, I have 3 minutes. I'm going to show you one cool thing. And go back to the elevations. Go back over there. Okay, this is an important thing to note. So when you hatch, AutoCAD hatches inside, I said, a box or a boundary. If this is supposed to look at like siding, look at the fact that on the bottom that there's this little like 1-inch piece of siding. No contractor in their right mind would ever install siding like that. They start from the bottom and work up, and so they would have an even piece of siding on the bottom. How you adjust that is you select it, so left click, and then up here is your origin point. So you left click on that, and then you tell the pattern where to start. So you can pick that point right there, and he adjusts. And you can do that with all sorts of, I'm going to change this one to the roof shake one. Whoops, delete. So I'm going to hatch. I'm going to switch just for good measure. H for hatch. I'm going to go find that roof shake one. Right there. Oh, make sure if your hatches are coming in solid, you're like, that's not right. Go back here and make sure you turn annotative off. So there, now I put that hatch pattern there. I hit enter. Again, no contractor would install this little partial piece right here. I'm going to select it. I'm going to change the origin point to the bottom corner, which is where they would start. And now my hatch fits cleanly in there. All right. He's not going to stretch, so that's the way the pattern was made. So I have to decide where I want my origin point to be. For those of you who are like the designers who are trying to lay out tile patterns, so I'm going to get rid of this thing, delete, and I am going to put in H for hatch. I'm going to go to a user-defined hatch right here. Say I'm doing a 4x12 tile in a bathroom. I'm going to make this guy 12, and I'm going to put him in, and now I'm going to change my origin point right there, and now I'm going to hatch again, and this guy is going to be 4, and I'm going to set him 90 degrees and put this guy in, and oh, it just worked out. So, but if this guy were off, if I had a weird partial, yeah, I could, this is how I tell my contractor I want a full tile in the left corner, or how you can do those things. So.
What if our shapes only work in annotative when it's on?
I am going to save, turn off the video, and come walk around and look at what you're doing. But if you're, the biggest goof up where things don't look the way you think they should is if you have this annotative either on or off and it's not supposed to be. Yep, only use annotative with annotative right there, those two guys. And I do this all the time too. I'll start doing stuff and you go, why is it coming in like that? Okay. So save, and I'm gonna